So growing up in this neighborhood in the early 1970s, you can imagine I was the first brown kid in what was then an all black, an entirely black neighborhood. 1972 Shaw, a neighborhood which had just come out of the civil rights movement. Soldiers were coming back from Vietnam, and it wasn't easy growing up here for me. Being the first Latino kid, I was bullied a lot. I was chased a lot. Many times they actually successfully stole a few bikes from me until I got a little older. And I imagine that it was as difficult as it was for me, that it was difficult for them as well. I remember being in the hallways or at the doors of some of my neighbors, some of my eventual little friends after a few years of living here and getting to know one another. The parents would yell, "I don't want no Mexican little kid in my house," and the same thing in my house. I remember my dad and my stepmom saying, "I don't want any little black kids in our house." And when you're small and at that age, when you're still a sponge and consuming all of that, it's incredible how you grow up with some of those things that you took in. I never hated blacks, which is why the message of Color United. I went through a process growing up here. I got mugged at gunpoint when I was a teenager. 2 cars were stolen at gunpoint from me. The third one I didn't let them steal. I threw away the keys out in those bushes that used to be right behind this fence. And I grew up with resentment. I resented, the blacks for many years into my young adult life. And it was a process of healing that had to take place in me when other black individuals that came into my life showed me that not everyone was out. Not every black person was out to cause me harm. And thus began that process for me of understanding that we really needed to come together. Americanos, the Project Americanos was about that. It was about showing others the Latino experience in America. Black and brown for me was something that I've had since I was a kid. I've always wanted to tell the story of black and brown, just because of what happened in this neighborhood. There's been so many changes here. I come back now, 47 years later, I come back into this neighborhood, and of course it's nothing of what it used to be. There's only a few buildings still standing. My old apartment building, which it looks a lot better now than it did back in that time. And the building across the street, the bank on the corner, the church. This park where we're at now was always the Kennedy Recreation Center, but it didn't have any of this. There were a couple of beat up basketball courts and the tennis courts were here, but it's much more beautiful than it was back then. Everything in this neighborhood is changed. Now you see white people everywhere, people of all colors everywhere, whereas back then, it has to be said the way it was. If you saw a white person in this neighborhood, either 2 things were going on. They were looking to score, or they were lost. Either way, they were always afraid. This was not a place where you wanted to be caught, especially at night. So I learned a lot from Shaw. I still love this neighborhood very much. I don't come often. Maybe after this I will, because after having walked around a little bit, it kind of filled my heart with a lot of good memories. I do have good things to say of Shaw. It educated me in more ways than the books will ever teach me about being a person of color myself, amongst others of color. Nothing like what I learned here. Taking that G2 bus right up the street, right across the street from here. That bus started and it still begins in Howard University, and it ends at Georgetown University. So the experience was that everybody on this side of the bus, everyone was black, and I was the brown kid on the bus. When we got to DuPont Circle, all the people of color would get off, and at the other side of DuPont Circle on P Street, all the white kids would get on that were going to Georgetown University. So imagine growing up with that. I would get on the Mexican bus, we called it back then, the 42, which would go from DuPont Circle up to the Adams Morgan, Connecticut Avenue area, which is the Woodley Zoo area, which is where I went to school. And one thing that I always remember about here, my name when I was growing up here was not, I never got called my name. I don't think they ever even knew my name. My name was Chico. And I had no idea in the early years when I was 4, 5, 6 years old what they were referring to. It wasn't until I was able to allowed to watch TV and turn knobs on the TV, that I learned that Chico was a reference to Chico and the Man, a television show. So then I learned that's why they called me Chico, but I stayed Chico all the way until I left when I was 18 years old. So this definitely holds a very dear place in my heart. Shaw was, for me, in the very beginning, I remember I would many times go in my room and cry because I didn't want to be here. It took years for me to be accepted. It took years for me to be understood. It took years for me to make little friends here who simply, and it took probably a good year when I first arrived, though I was only 4 or 5 years old, to speak English. So, you know, there was always that challenge too in the beginning. But Color United is a project that speaks exactly of what happened here. You walk around this neighborhood now, you see white people. You still see there are plenty of black people in the community still, whether they're from back then or not, I have no idea. You see a lot of people from India and a lot of Asians. Chinatown was only 4 or 5 blocks away from here, but their presence didn't come this high. When I lived here, they stayed in their little corner. Now they're all the way. Now they can see them everywhere. So that's what A Color United is actually about. It's about bringing everybody together and learning how to live with one another, learning about each other's cultures. If you look at the restaurants in this neighborhood now, you have restaurants from all over the world, all the cultures, all the flavors, right? And this is a good example of what we want America to look like, to be like everywhere, not just in little spots here, little spots there. America needs to be this entirely, so that we can be a united front, a united people, and we can end this division, the division amongst us.